You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hi. Okay, so today I'm joined by Dr. Vanessa F. Freeman, fellow Jersey girl and founder of Searching for Self Therapy and Consulting. Dr. V believes that therapy has the power to help individuals unlock, access, and/or reconnect to their authentic selves. She also has a passion for supporting the Black community and communities of color. In her consulting work, Dr. V is committed to finding ways to create more inclusive environments for all marginalized groups. Dr. Vanessa received her doctorate from Florida State University and attended the University of Delaware for her bachelor's and master's degrees. In her spare time, she enjoys spending time with family and friends, watching true crime shows, who doesn't, learning about the universe, love it, and sitting quietly with a hot cup of tea. Today, Dr. Vanessa and I talk about her experience working in higher education, institutional racism, and what drove her to ultimately leave her position and open her private practice. We talk about what it's like to work with her as a therapist and what her personal experience of working with her therapist is like, and obviously a lot more. So, I really enjoyed this conversation, and while I already have a therapist, Dr. V is someone I'd seek out in a heartbeat. She just gets it, and maybe she just gets me. So, all right, anyway, here's our conversation. Hey, Dr. Vanessa, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I have so many questions. I was looking at your bio on your website, and we have a couple of things in common. We're both Jersey girls.
Yep.
I was a sociology major as well.
Great. Love it.
Yeah. So, and you worked in higher education for a little while.
Mm-hmm. For the majority of my career, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you helped college students figure out what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you how. Like, how do you do that?
That's a great question. I wish I had the perfect answer, because I'd probably be making a lot of money if I did. But it's mainly just listening to them, number one, and then helping them see what's possible. I don't know what your experience is, but at least my experience when I got to college was I thought I was going to do one thing, and then I wound up doing something completely different because I just didn't know what the options were, what was available, what I was good at, what I liked. So a lot of it just is sitting with folks and saying, what do you like? What do you feel like you do well in? Do you like what you do well in? What other pressures are there, perhaps from parents or friends or other teachers or professors around, what you think you should be doing, and does that align with what you want? So not necessarily giving them answers, but asking them some critical questions that they probably haven't been asked before, to help them get a little more clarity around what do you want? Because it's going to be your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious because, I loved my school. I had a great experience there, but that was one area where I really feel like I was let down in a lot of ways. I recall my mom forcing me. She's like, go to the career center, take advantage of it. And I sat down with the woman, and she gave me this test of sorts. And I will never forget this. She emailed me however many days later. She's like, the results of your test, whatever it was, are in. And so one of the suggestions for your career path could be a florist. And I was like, huh, and obviously no knock to florists
Yeah,
and
yeah.
being a business owner it would be great, but
Hmm.
like I I just didn't get it,
Yeah.
and unfortunately that just really it put a bad taste in my mouth for the
Mm,
the program as a whole in terms of
yeah.
a career path. Anyway,
Hmm.
it seemed very much like if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or in finance, insurance, like we got you, you're golden.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, we do give, so I was a career counselor for a little while and doing exactly that, helping people by giving assessments. I think the critical part there is talking about like why might florists have popped up.
Mm,
So some of these assessments, they'll pull like, they'll group careers by different interests. So if you think about what a florist does, there's attention to detail, there's
mm-hmm,
maybe interacting with people, there's some entrepreneurship if you're a business owner,
mm-hmm,
right? So there may have been some things in that assessment that pulled that out, florist just being one. But there are lots of other jobs and careers that could also map onto that. So the critical piece there is having a conversation, not just saying, here, go be a florist, but to say, like,
yeah,
what about that could be appealing and where can you find that other places? And that just requires a longer conversation, a little more one on one. That was what I enjoyed about doing career counseling is having some of those conversations with students and folks trying to make career changes as well.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. As an adult, I can look back and understand everything of what you're saying. I think
Yeah.
just as an adult in training at the time,
Yeah.
I was not. I think I just expected a little bit more guidance, a little more push, like if
Mhm.
my mom hadn't gotten me on the phone one day and said, I'm not paying for this education for you to not go to the career center, basically, like I
Yeah.
don't know that I would have gone. And
Yeah.
I don't, that's a problem to me. I see that as a problem.
Yeah. I think that's the transition point of that college age student, like 18 to 24, is you're leaving the house that you grew up in with your
Hmm.
parents or guardians who have dictated a lot of what you do. You go to
Yeah.
school at this time, you eat dinner at this time, you go to these after school things, and then folks get to college and it's not like that at all. You
No.
are really just left to your own devices. And there's a really big gap there of someone was telling me what to do and now I have to tell me what to do and I don't know how to do that. And
Yeah.
that feels really scary. Um, so I think what you're feeling is what you felt rather is a lot of what a lot of college students feel. I felt it. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know how to do this thing. Y'all just letting me out
Right.
to roam free? What? Are you
What time
sure?
do I go to bed? What do you do? What do you mean?
Right.
What's for dinner?
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So it's a really scary and exciting time and you know that's part of why I really enjoyed working in higher ed is because it's such a special time for folks where you get to really reflect on some of those questions and figure out a little bit of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I have some it sounds like unresolved issues with my experience, but also because it's a lot of why as a adult now I'm I didn't know what I wanted to do for a long time and
Mhm.
I ended up in a job through connections and I ended up being
Mhm.
good at it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of us end up in that situation.
Yep, that's the big lie that we get told before we go to college is major in this thing, get a job in this thing, and you're set.
Yeah.
And part of my approach when I was working with college students is like, that's not true. Let
Mm,
me, let's take that and throw that out. That's not how the world works now. Maybe 40, 50 years ago when people stayed in jobs and retired in jobs and cost of everything was cheaper. But now people move around. It's who you know, it's your experiences. So we have to be more flexible. And every time I say that to anyone, it's like, but I don't want the gray. I want black and white. And it's
yeah.
like, well, that's not what being a human in this world is like. It's
Yeah.
so much gray. So, I think that's the hard reality of college and beyond, that the things we were told when we were younger don't quite hold up in the same way.
Yeah. And do you find, or would you say that some of that, uncertainty and what we've been told versus what is, taking that more to now who my audience might be,
Hmm.
millennials, moms, transitioning, a lot of that is still in play, correct? I mean,
Hmm. Yeah.
what how do you have any advice or anywhere that you might start with someone who's looking to transition or make a change or is feeling really stuck in whatever job they're in?
Yeah. So I will say I found my way to the job I'm doing now in the same way it sounds like you found your way to doing what you're doing. It's kind of just like, I'll go over here for a little bit. That feels okay. How about over here? How about over there? So I can really relate to that on a personal level. I would encourage folks, if people are feeling the uncertainty or the stuckness, to not feel like a failure because you're there, to
Mm,
kind of embrace it and say, of course, because life is change, life is evolution. When you're transitioning roles in life from like single person to partnered person, mom, not mom to mom, right? Like
mm,
kids in the house to not being in the house, being taken care of by your parents to taking care of your parents. That's life. And so if we can get comfortable with the uncertainty and the flexibility, then it opens up a little more doors for us to explore things that we might not have explored otherwise.
mm,
So I would say getting comfortable with uncertainty, but then looking for the excitement and opportunity within it and pushing yourself to say, like, maybe there's some things over to the left that I wouldn't have explored because I was so focused on the right. And the left's okay. It's okay
mm.
to deviate. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to reinvent. All of those things don't mean failure. They mean growth. They mean evolution.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's a really hard one. Yes.
Yeah, we're really, ingrained with this, do that, do this, do that.
Yep.
It's really hard to get out of it.
Yes. And there are some things, right, where it's like you need to follow step by step. You
Hmm.
don't want to skip steps. But I think life is just so much more dynamic than that. And where a lot of suffering comes from is fighting that versus kind of using it or embracing
Mm-hmm.
it or being open to it, so
Mm-hmm.
that then we can be our full selves, whatever that might look like.
Mm-hmm. So, why did you leave that position, that whatever the last position you were in with the in higher education?
Yeah, so I had a couple different roles within higher ed. I was an academic advisor. My very first role was a resident assistant. So the people on the dorm floor, um, in charge of the floor as a 20-year-old in charge of 18-year-olds. I mean,
Yeah,
what am I doing?
right.
And then I was an academic advisor working with those students that we were talking about. And I was a career counselor. My last position in higher ed was as a psychologist in the counseling center.
Mm,
And I really enjoyed higher ed. I thought that was where I was going to retire. I was going to move through the ranks. Um, but I think the last couple years in particular, for me personally, highlighted some of the structural challenges in place in higher ed
mm,
pertaining particularly to institutional racism
mm,
and inequality, and just a lot of the ways that higher ed thinks of itself as being very progressive and a place where there's a lot of free thought, but that just kind of masks the fact that it's an institution in this particular country, just like any other institution, with a lot of ingrained issues. And as a biracial Black woman, my particular job at this institution was serving Black students. It was hard to be a part of the institution and also serve students and
oh
also
wow.
be a
Mm,
Black person.
mm,
There was just a lot I was bumping up against that it took a toll on my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, and I just had to do something different.
yeah,
So I left and started my own private practice, and now that's what I'm doing.
yeah. Wow. Do you have any ideas I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but do you
Hmm.
have any ideas on what we could start to do to make it so that you wouldn't have felt like you needed to leave?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really, it has to start with people being willing to be okay with the fact that you don't know everything,
Mm,
and that, especially for white folks, when we're talking about race in particular, um, your experience isn't the only one, right? And so much of what I feel like I bumped up against was, well, I don't experience it this way. So what you're saying isn't true, or
mm,
isn't, I don't think you understood it right, or I think you got it wrong. Or, it wasn't taking my lived experience at face value. So I think there has to be some openness to, like, there are parts of life I don't understand or see because I don't walk through life that way, and it's okay. It doesn't make me inherently a bad person. It doesn't, take away from my accomplishments, but it is a factor in all of this. And if we could start there, to being open to, like, we don't know everything and people add value the more difference we have, then I think we can start to include more voices, center different people in decision making and policy changes, all of that, that then truly does create equity versus always having the same type of person be the standard.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine how difficult that must have been because I feel like the generations coming up now, the what are they, Gen Z and
Mhm.
excuse me, and the college age kids now. I mean, I feel like they're just like leaps and bounds ahead
Yeah.
of where even millennials were at that age and so on.
Mhm.
And so you have these kids who probably just don't even understand why there would be issues that you might
Mhm.
face within the structure.
Yeah.
That must have been tough. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was not a good time. I learned a lot and I grew a lot, but that growth came with a lot of pain and
Yeah.
trauma as
Yeah.
well. And it's so my I'm so passionate about social justice and kind of progressing us to a place where nobody really has to suffer, right? That utopia, that it was a hard decision to say, like, but I gotta go.
Yeah.
Like, I could
It's too
stay
much.
and continue the fight, but, like, what good am I if I'm not okay? I
Yeah.
have to choose myself in that instance. And
Yeah.
that's not failure. That's just me preserving myself to see another day to continue the fight.
Yeah. Yeah. I and it was tough. I think last summer
Mhm.
was a big summer, and
Yeah.
I even myself that like I said I had a good experience in college, even high school.
Mhm.
Um, really, for the first time, I took a good look at those institutions,
Mhm.
and it wasn't so pretty, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. And I love them dearly, I do, but I had some words. It was,
Mhm.
and even thinking about my kids. I said to my high school, I'm like, I'm deciding how much I want to say. If you can't tell, I'm
Yeah.
deciding in my
I know
head,
how that goes.
and I'm
Yeah.
deciding how much I want to say out loud. But I more or less said to my high school, it's been my dream to have the potential of sending my kid here.
Mhm.
But as it stands, the way this is set up and how you're handling this particular situation, I couldn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
And that was I had never looked at it that way before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think last summer, a lot of folks had that kind of moment of, like, these glasses either came on,
Yeah.
off, or on, or however
Hmm.
you want to put it, and it was like, wow, things are not okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's rough out here, and we all have decisions to make about what part we want to play in changing that,
Hmm.
how much we want to educate ourselves, myself included, and what we're willing really to put forth, the energy, effort, challenge to ourselves we're willing to put forth to make the change we want to see. And it's not easy in any stretch. It's a
Yeah.
hard road we're on, but one that I think is, I mean, it's definitely worthwhile and that we can do, but there's a long way to go.
Yeah. And I think, and I'll just say one more thing about it. I don't want to,
Mhm.
overly harp on this, I guess, but
Mhm.
I think truly, even just as you're talking, it's a hard thing. It's a tough road. Like, it really sunk in how the road has always been tough.
Mhm.
It just really was probably one of the first times, I'd say, particularly as an adult woman,
Mhm.
that I even really said, okay, I need to really look at this road, look
Yeah.
back at the road that I came up on, and look
Mhm.
forward. And I think, too, becoming a parent and thinking about the kind
Yeah.
of world that I want my kids to live in and all the things. So, my point is that I was sharing that it was emotional or tough for me to really look at institutions that I've
Mhm.
loved for so long and see some downfalls, but really that
Mhm.
it was that I was it's never not been that way. It's just that I
Yeah.
was seeing it for the first time. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good for you for confronting it, right? And then doing that for yourself too. I think that's the work that we all have to do to get where we want to go.
Yeah. All right. So you are now in private practice.
Mhm.
And what types of clients are you working with primarily?
So, primarily black folks,
Okay.
majority women. So, mainly black women. I have a few black men on my caseload, and then one or two other folks of color. But yeah, that's primarily who I'm serving, which is very different than any of my other experiences because a lot of my work was in higher education at
Yeah.
predominantly white institutions. So it's a nice change.
Good. Yeah. I interviewed Dr. Holly Sawyer, and
Hmm.
her episode aired recently, and she shared that she became a therapist because as a black woman she was looking for a black woman therapist and just couldn't find one that worked
Yep.
with her schedule and her insurance and
Yeah.
just availability and all that. And I noticed that on your website you speak about therapy counseling as being a challenging topic within the black community.
Hmm.
In your view, why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated, right? I'm gonna skim the surface of
Totally
like the deeper
generalized,
things,
right?
right?
Yeah, like this is not
Um,
for every single person,
Correct.
right? It's
Right. Right.
generalized
So
statements,
that's
yes.
the
Yeah.
disclaimer, right?
Yeah.
My personal view and in my experience, I think we think about the field of psychology again. We come back to racism and white supremacy, right? It was not something created for anyone other than white folks and white men by white men, right?
Hmm.
So automatically you have a service or a field that is not for a whole bunch of people. So that's one piece. So access, right? Even seeing it as something that like we do. A lot
Hmm.
of folks will say like therapy is not something we do, meaning like black folks don't do that. That's for white people, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then there are oftentimes I'll hear folks say like, "Oh, pray it away." Go to church, right? Lean into your faith, which is fine. Definitely, encourage people to rely on their coping skills and things that make them feel whole. Um, but also starting to shift to see therapy as something that can be a part of that, and that it's not something that is not for us because we're all people with challenges. Therapy is for people who want to address those challenges, want to sit with themselves. So I think it's a combination of, it not really being something accessible to us, but also not being marketed as something that's for us. And that just kind of getting passed down through generation after generation. But that's changing now quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask, do you find that now, again, like with the younger generations, I feel like it's almost cool now to have a
Hmm.
therapist, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, it's becoming much more normalized. It's much more commonplace for people to talk about their mental health in a very open and honest way. And I think to your point with the other therapists that you talked to, now that there are more therapists of color and Black therapists, I think you find that more Black people are looking for it, right?
Yeah.
So often what I hear when people find me is,
Mm.
I wanted to come, but I wanted to meet with someone who at least had some type of cultural understanding.
Yeah.
And if I don't see folks who look like me, then I'm going to be less inclined to seek out the service. So I think now that there are more of us coming through these programs and, being open for business, I think that will also shift for not just the younger folks, but millennials and above.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, there's so many times, even throughout my own therapy, where I will start to say something, and my therapist will just be like, yeah, no, I get it, keep going, and
Yeah.
it's so comforting, especially even just from an efficiency point of view. Like, I don't have
hmm
to explain to her anything really about being a mom. Like, she knows, she gets
Right.
it, she has kids, so. And oddly enough, or coincidentally enough, like her kids are about the same age as one of mine. So I'll just say one thing and she's like, yep, got it, and move on to your feelings. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I
Right.
don't have to explain every little detail. So I
Yeah.
can imagine even on a much bigger scale,
hmm
and even she and I, we grew up in the same area. There's certain
Yeah.
things that she just gets,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
makes a big
It makes
difference.
a huge difference. Huge
Yeah.
difference. There are so many times where my clients and I are talking, and even the language that we're using,
Mm,
right? Like, I can tell that they are being more fully themselves with me than maybe they would be in a space where they're the only, or, where we have to code switch, right? So I
yeah.
can see that, and I don't correct it, and I understand it, and it does kind of just facilitate a more comfortable environment, I think,
Yeah.
where
I
folks can
think
then get to the work.
right. I think it helps to more quickly establish trust.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
A
And
hundred
just
percent.
a likability between you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Do you see a therapist?
I do. Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I'm in the process of moving out of the state, so now I have to find a new therapist, which is a
Oh,
bummer.
yeah.
But yes, I was seeing a therapist.
Okay. I always ask because I think that it's as important as it is that people seek help, that they understand that even their therapists have
hmm
help. And to me, I'd almost be a little bit alarmed if they didn't. Like, why am I doing this work if you're not, Like, it's good work.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, yeah, I've been seeing my current, previous now therapist for about a year, maybe a little over a year.
Hmm.
And it was a really good decision.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
along the similar lines to what we were just talking about establishing trust and likability and just that relationship, I did read your blog post of your letter to yourself.
Mm,
I'll link it for everyone in the show notes, but I just really appreciated your vulnerability. And
mm,
where's the line for you with your clients in self-disclosure?
mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. In everything that I do that has the potential to be seen. So even in this interaction, right, where I'm like, okay, who's going to be listening? Who might hear it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm always deciding what who's this for, right?
Mm.
Like, especially, and in session two, like in anything that I say, it's like, if it's just for me to either, a client has said something that I can relate to and I just want to say, oh yeah, me too,
Mm-hmm.
that's not useful. But if it
Mm.
feels like it will be helpful in terms of illustrating a point or a point of connection, or that me being vulnerable allows other people to feel like they can be vulnerable, if it's in the service of others, then I feel more comfortable
Okay.
disclosing. Obviously, there are going to be things that I don't share on my
Mm.
Instagram page or my blog or anything like that, or in session. Um, but it's really being intentional about who's this for,
Yeah.
and what is my gut telling me about whether this is the time to say whatever it is I'm getting ready to say.
Yeah.
Honing that over time has been very important to me.
I feel like that is a useful skill in almost any conversation, right? Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
Who is this for?
Who is this for?
I
Is it
love
about
that.
you? Is it
Right.
about the other person? What does the other person need at the
Right.
moment? Would this be something that might feel like, oh, okay, I'm not alone? Or is it going to be like, why are you telling me that? That has nothing to do with what I just said. I
Hmm.
don't always get it right.
Right.
But, I think the more I ask myself that question, the less likely I am to disclose in a way that's not useful.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I mean, the whole point of this is to see your humanness, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's what we're talking about. So
Yes, yes,
it's going to be impossible for anyone to get it right all of the time. I mean,
correct. Yeah.
and for one or both parties, there'll be a lesson in that, you know?
Yeah. And if part of doing therapy and being a therapist is also being able to go back and check in. And if you've missed the mark, to say, like, I think I might have overshared, or, I want to acknowledge,
Yes.
how did that make you feel, right? It's being able to, like, man, I messed up. I got to go back
Mm,
now and repair. So I trust too that if I've overstepped or something is weird, that I can go back and try to repair it as best I can.
yeah.
And that's really all any of us can do in anything.
Right. That happened with me once. She came back to
Mhm.
me and she's like, "I just want to apologize." I was like, "Oh, I didn't even notice." It's you know what I mean?
Yep.
And I could tell, or at least it seemed to me that she had been like agonizing
Yep.
over the whole week, and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Yep. Yep. And that also happens where
Yeah.
we spend so much more time, like, going to consult with other therapists. Can you tell me if I should pop? What do you think? And then we get there and sometimes it's, oh, yeah, that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great.
It happened actually once in the reverse too. I said something, I was telling a story about a friend and I said something as a certain way, and I like really try not to obviously communicate outside of the session, and I
Hmm.
but I like couldn't even help myself. I texted her. I was like, I just feel so poorly about how I said this, and I would hate for you to think of me that way. And she's like, I really don't even remember. Like, it just like it was such a non-issue,
Yep. Yep.
um because I think at least for me it's hard to really know and feel secure all the time that she it's like I know it on a logical point of view that she knows me probably better than most people and sees all the good, all the challenges, everything. But when you're in the moment, sometimes you're like, "Ooh, does she like me?" Like,
Hmm.
"Ooh, do I sound really like a horrible person?" As I'm
Yep.
talking.
Yep, yep. I've had clients ask me that. I've thought that myself
Yeah,
as the client, like,
yeah.
man, I must be so annoying right now. I
Right,
think I'm
right,
I'm
right.
doing things that annoy me being
Yes,
on your end, but you can't.
yes.
It's a whole weird dynamic. Therapy is such a strange thing.
Yeah, it really is because I think of her like she's like my best friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But I know about three things about her.
right, right. So strange.
It
And
is.
then when it's over, whenever that is,
Oh,
it's not like you can be friends.
right,
It's just like you go
right.
and you never talk again. It's so bizarre.
No, that makes me so sad.
I know. I know.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I know. Wait. So this is one thing I am sort of wondering. How do you start to feel like it's over? Like when, I mean, obviously a move, that would be something
Hmm.
like there could be logistical reasons why it's
Yeah.
over. But as far as, the therapeutic journey, when do we start to feel like, we're good? Like we might need to
Yeah.
check in a little while, but really we're good.
Yeah. I think it's when you feel like you've achieved whatever brought you to therapy in the first place, right?
Hmm.
Now that may change over time, right? Like I have some clients where we start one place and then life happens and now that's what we're addressing, right? But when it feels like you're getting to a place, for me at least, where when we meet, we're kind of just chatting, there's not really a concern, or people are coming in saying, I don't really know what there is to talk about, then
Mm-hmm.
that starts me wondering, well, let's reevaluate whether this is needed. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a decrease in frequency. Maybe we pause for a little bit and see how you feel. And if you need to come back, you come back. But I always try to bring that up when I feel that happening of like, it
Okay.
seems like you haven't really had much to talk about the last couple of sessions. What's that about? Are you
Mm.
feeling okay? And would it be okay for us to maybe not need this. And
Hmm.
then that's when people are like, no, 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 I don't want to stop. And it's like, right, but I'm not
Right.
supposed to be here forever.
Right. Right.
As much as I would love to know what happens to everyone for the rest of their lives, that's not how it works.
Right. Right.
It's a tough call though. So I try to be collaborative in that with my clients, but also at some point kind of having to say this is I don't know that this is needed anymore.
Mm, yeah.
It's
Ugh.
tough.
Ugh, I'm not. Yeah. On one hand, I want to say I'm looking forward to it, right? Because,
Mhm.
right, on the other hand,
Yeah.
no.
It's a loss.
Yes.
It's a loss.
That's my best friend.
I know. It's a loss. It's painful, I think on both ends, right? Like for the client and for the therapist too. And
Mm,
especially because we know we don't get to see what happens next,
right.
right? There's so many people I've met with that I know so much about that I will never see again.
Yeah.
It's a very odd place to be.
That's bizarre. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
Sad.
yeah.
Sometimes it's really sad.
Yeah. Oh, well, I I saw this meme or whatever online this week. Or no, I think it was a TikTok. I can't stop scrolling on TikTok. It's so bad. Like at like 10 o'clock, I'll be like, all right, babe, I'm going to bed. Like, see you. And he'll come up like an hour later and I'm in bed just like, you know, it's terrible. It's
Still on
really,
TikTok.
yeah. But I've learned now. I can't say I'm going to bed at 11 and scroll for an hour. I go to
Right.
quote unquote bed at 10 and
Correct.
scroll. It's so bad. Anyway, I saw there's TikTok. It was I guess a therapist, a guy therapist, and he was like, what I say to my clients when they pull up their phone and say, this text message interaction happened and I could summarize it for you, and then and then the client looks at him and says, or I could just read it, and he goes, and what I say is, sure, if that's what you want, no problem. He goes, but in my head I'm going, yes, read every message back and forth, I want to know every detail of this. And it hit me, and it reminded me of what we're talking about, because
Mhm.
in real life, outside of the therapy session,
Mhm.
to me, that's so annoying. Like,
Yeah.
it's so annoying for a person to sit down and be like, let me read this entire text conversation back and forth.
Right.
But in the session, it might be really relevant, and it might
Yeah.
be like the simplest of word or nuance of a text that
Yeah.
like changes the whole thing. It just was
It's
funny.
so true. Well, because oftentimes when you're hearing a story from a client, it's one-sided.
Mm,
I only
mm-hmm,
get your version of events. In a
mm-hmm.
text message exchange, if you're reading that to me, I hear both parties.
Yeah.
And now maybe I can help the client see things in a way that maybe they couldn't because they're in it. So
Mm-hmm.
it is really good information. Um, and yeah, when folks are like, I can read it to you, I'm like, yeah, sure, that's
Yeah.
fine. Let's
Yeah.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
let's,
Spill. Give me
let's
the
see what
tea.
what happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so funny. It's funny. Oh my goodness. Well, what do you wish more people knew about therapy? What do you think is lacking in, like we were talking about earlier, like the marketing for therapy?
Yeah. Oh boy, a lot.
Yeah.
I think I wish more people knew that therapy is not just for quote unquote crazy people.
Right.
That you don't just need to be in a crisis to be in therapy. You can be in a transition. You can be, wanting to explore a part of yourself that you haven't before. Like you can approach therapy in a number of different ways. So it's not reserved for a certain type of person. It really is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that you have to do work outside of session. That
Mm-hmm.
it's I can't solve your problems, period. That's not my job. But I certainly can't help you once a week, sometimes every other week for 45 to 50 minutes if
Right.
you're not doing anything in between.
Right.
I think folks think I just come and we talk and that's supposed to fix it. And it's like, no, then we take what we've talked about and apply it. That's how
Right.
change happens. So that it is work. It won't always feel good. Sometimes you will hate it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. It means you're really digging deep and pushing yourself. And that the therapists are human too.
Yeah.
that, we are there for you, but we are also people with our own lives and
Mm-hmm.
things going on, needs, um, and that there are times where we may not be there for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a reflection on you, it's that we're people too.
Mm-hmm.
um, I've started to feel a lot more passionately about that one now that I'm in private practice than when I was working in higher ed.
Yeah. So how do you take care of yourself sitting on the other
Hmm.
end of the conversation?
Yeah. I think going to my own therapy has been really helpful because it then allows me my own space to do my own stuff so that I'm
Mm-hmm.
not bringing it into my sessions
Mm-hmm.
or getting triggered by other people's stuff. It seems
Mm-hmm.
like when things are going on in my own personal life, inevitably I will have people with the same kinds of things. Like if it's something with my
Oh,
mom, now they're talking about
wow.
their mom, or if it's something with their partner now, or with my partner, now they're talking about their partner. And it's,
Mm,
if I don't have my own space to work through that for myself, then now I'm getting caught up in my own head instead of listening. So my own therapy has been very important. Maintaining schedule boundaries for myself has been really important. Not, it's so hard to tell people no,
yeah.
but I know that I'm not gonna serve you well at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So no, I can't see you at 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Even though technically I could, I won't. So I think like maintaining my boundaries and then really having routines for myself that meet me wherever I need to be. Like my mornings are just so important to me, I've found, of like,
Okay.
I need a couple of hours as I wake up to like exercise and meditate and eat and drink my coffee and like ground myself for the day before I jump into my job. So, you know, and asking for help. That's
Yeah.
one that I'm always working on.
Yeah. I know that, why is that so hard for us to do?
I don't know. I don't know.
I wish everyone could see your face as you had just answered that. It's a big one,
It's
especially
tough.
for the females. I don't know
Hmm.
why that is so hard.
Yeah, it's
Ugh.
tough. It is a tough one, but I've found over the last couple years, especially, um, that I can't do it all alone. Sometimes, a lot of times, you need other people to help you out, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. So I'm trying to practice that every day.
Yeah. So what part of your experience working with clients, what part do you feel like really good about? Like what do you feel like you do really well?
That's a good question. I think I do a really good job of making people feel comfortable.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Like you know that we're now best friends, right? Like this is like you're my just new
Love it.
person. Okay, good.
Great.
Just so you know.
I'm down. I'm
Okay,
down.
excellent.
Yeah, I think I do a really good job of making people feel comfortable, and I think my vulnerability is my superpower, right? Like I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm not going to
Right.
pretend that I know more than I do, or
Hmm.
if I don't know something, I'm going to say it. Like, I feel like I do a good job of maybe demystifying, like, oh, you're a doctor. It's like, yeah, but I don't know what I'm doing, just like
Right.
everybody else. Like,
Right.
I have some knowledge in some areas, but I'm a human trying to figure this thing out. So I think those two things I do really well, which serves me very well in the work that I do, because then people feel like they too can be vulnerable or be honest or, ask questions. They don't have to fear me
Right.
in a sense.
Right. Yeah.
We're the same in a lot
Yeah.
of ways and not so much in a lot of other ways.
Right. Are you seeing people in person or virtually?
Still virtually.
Still virtually.
I
Yeah.
started my practice in the middle of the pandemic,
Oh
so it's
wow.
always been virtual. Um, and I don't know if and when I'm going to go in person. That's
Hmm.
still a big question mark for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten used to it,
Hmm.
and it's
I just think
it's
it's
really easy.
easier.
It's so
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a true, 50, 45, 50 minutes. Whereas before you got to travel, you got to park, you got to do a
Right.
bunch of stuff. So,
Yeah. On one hand, I miss, because I would like drive my kids to my dad, and then
hmm
go to the office.
Yeah.
And so there was that little window of nobody in the car with me, which was very nice. But it was my whole morning, like you said, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And yeah, there are pros and cons for sure. And I miss, like, so all the people that I meet with now, I've never seen in person, which is so weird.
That is weird.
So I do miss kind of like that interaction, but yeah, there's a lot to be gained from me just being able to be in my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Um, you did. I'm going back to that blog post and just the humanity of the therapist. You talked about some of your own anxiety, your own depression. How does that manifest for you? What does that look like?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. To be honest, it's something that I just in the last, this is going to sound terrible. I am a good therapist, people. I don't want folks thinking I'm not. But in the last year or so, really started even acknowledging that that's what I'm experiencing.
Mm,
It took my therapist using that language with me of like, oh, is that what's going on? And it's like,
mm,
how long have you been training in this field, girl, that you didn't realize that? So it's a fairly new thing for me to put the label to it and then be able to interact with it in that way. But for me, it's just, it's not sleeping, getting distracted, feeling unmotivated, just like your classic things with both of those, anxiety and depression, sometimes feeling maybe a little hopeless, really
yeah,
tired.
yeah.
The good part now about having put some names to it is that I feel better equipped to address it
Mm-hmm.
when it maybe does start to bubble up and to work with myself versus against myself when I'm maybe not feeling my best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find the same. If I label it, I
Hmm.
know what it is, and then I can deal with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So it's yeah, it's been, and the last year I think COVID, every being home and all of the things just slowed me down enough to really say, okay, we have to do some things differently
Mm-hmm.
here if we're
Yeah.
going to be healthy and well going forward.
Yeah, and I think I was going to say that as well. That everything you described, I think most people, at one point or another, throughout all of this last year, almost 2 years now, right, have felt one or more or all of those things.
I don't know how. I would be impressed to the folks who did not. I want to know your secrets.
Would you believe them? I don't think I would
No,
believe them.
no, I would not. But I really want to hear
Right,
how,
right.
because how could you? The world's been turned upside down and still turned upside down. So
Yeah,
it's been a ride.
yeah. Do you have, either from your own experience or in what you might have worked through with your clients this past year, advice, tips for someone who's listening going, yeah, I felt all of those things and for time and time they creep up? Like, what are some coping strategies, like things that they can do at home? Obviously, I think
Yeah.
you and I would both agree they should just go see a therapist, but
Yep.
there's places to start if that's not
Yeah.
available
Yeah.
or, not doable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will, since you mentioned my blog post, I also have a post on there about creating an emotional like first aid kit
Mm-hmm.
um, that folks can check out. But essentially, it's just kind of saying to yourself ahead of time before you're kind of feeling whatever it is you're going to feel, anxious, depressed. Um, what do I usually need in those moments? So it may be creating a playlist in advance. It may be, having your favorite blanket or other tactile thing available, knowing that when I'm sad, I like to drink hot tea. When I'm angry, I need to go for a walk. When I'm scared or anxious, I need to write everything down. Like really sitting with yourself and saying, in those moments, what usually helps, and then making that list, putting it somewhere. I had a client once put it in an actual physical box, like had there an actual box and then put stuff in it so that you take some of the guesswork out of it once you're in it. You can kind of just say, all right, I'm prepared for this.
Yeah.
Let me dig in there and see what's going to fit for where I am right now,
Mm-hmm.
and be open to adjusting as needed, right? Because sometimes we need to shift and change. The things that worked 2 weeks ago might not work today. So, how can we be open to navigating that as it comes. But yeah, I think just being kind to yourself. I'm really big on self-compassion
Mm,
too. That's often what I'm talking about in my sessions with my clients is that it's hard being human
yeah,
and we don't need to add to our suffering by beating ourselves up.
yeah,
We can just meet ourselves where we are, put our arm around ourselves and encourage ourselves through whatever it is we're going through.
yeah. I think that, well, I'll first respond to what you said about the box. I like that idea, actually. But for me, and probably by now, anyone who listens regularly will have heard me say this before, but the week before my period is usually a very tough week, and I've played with my meds to make that a little bit easier, but that's just the 7 to 10 days before. I have a conversation with my husband. Reminder, we're in that week. I say to myself, it's okay that I'm going to order in more than I cook, and the kids are going to get more screen time than they normally do. Like
Love
that
it.
that's it. It just,
Yeah.
and I think before I was able to really see it as that week, in the moment it felt like, oh my god, they're getting all this screen time, and oh, I'm spending all
Hmm.
this money on food, and it's like, because I wasn't necessarily equating it to, well, it's just for this week, and then I'll go back to making my at-home salads and dinners and blah. And we'll go back to going to the park and all the crazy, but like for this week, nope. And if I feel good, we do it, but it gives me permission to not.
It shifts your whole perspective on things of like, oh, this isn't permanent. I haven't failed in some way, shape, or form. I'm adjusting to where I am in this moment.
Right.
And when it's past, I'll adjust again.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the part about self-compassion, I
Mhm.
think, especially like you said, like through this period of time in the slowing down, you know, I've heard people say that before, right? Like, be kind to yourself, speak kindly to yourself, just be nice to yourself. But I didn't realize how really, um hmm, how much I was almost hiding from myself the areas and the times that I was being hard on myself. Because when I heard that, I would think, well, I don't like look in the mirror and go, you're ugly or you're lazy, or, I think when I heard it, I was thinking of these really extreme forms of negativity towards myself. But when I slowed down, I was able to really hear the thoughts that were almost happening all day long without me even realizing.
Yeah. Yeah. They're so much more subtle. And it's the
They
more
are.
subtle ones that are so insidious. And that then it's like, but that's not, I'm not being hard on myself. And it's like, but do you hear what you just said?
Right.
Like,
Right.
that actually is pretty mean and probably
Yeah.
doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah.
That's what has to shift. Yeah, it's so much deeper than tell yourself you're beautiful. It's
Right.
also like what you were saying about the screen time for your kids. It's whatever the commentary in your mind about that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're failing somehow, and it may not
Right.
that might have been the words, but that's the sentiment.
Right.
And that's where the compassion has to come in.
It's a lot of shoulds and should
Yes.
nots
Yes.
that are don't necessarily come across as harshly as they really are,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I know you understood me based on your response, but I feel like I did not explain it as clearly as I wanted to. I think it's just more like, I'm not like cussing myself out. I'm just
Mhm.
going, "Oh, you shouldn't have eaten that.
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
you should have gone for a walk today.
Yep.
Oh, you should have folded the laundry."
Yes.
It's those things that if I really, really sit back over the course of an entire day, it's constant.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot, and it
Yeah.
over time it compounds.
Oh, yeah.
and it makes you feel like I didn't accomplish anything today or I was bad today, quote unquote, right?
Right.
And it's like, but is that entirely true? Who set that standard? Who said that that's what you should have done in the first place?
Yeah.
You can change that. You can meet yourself where you're at. And maybe today wasn't the day to
Mm-hmm.
make a salad at home. Maybe it was the day to go get a burger.
Yeah.
It'll be all right.
Yeah. I went through the Panera drive-through today.
Yeah. Listen, I was at Panera yesterday.
I was like, my kids are my daughter doesn't have school today for Yom Kippur, and I was like, you know what, I'm outsourcing lunch. I just can't. You know what? I don't
Yeah.
want to handle it at home. And they ate
Yes.
it in the car,
Love
and that
it.
was just fine.
And the world keeps spinning and
Yes.
they're okay. And that
Yes.
is really sometimes all we can do.
Yep. I know. I know. Well, Dr. Vanessa, is there anything that has surprised you now about either being in your own business or the difference between what you're doing before and working one on one with people? Anything that you didn't expect that you're liking, not
Yeah.
liking?
So much.
Mm.
It's interesting. I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctorate. I've spent a lot of time in school, a
Hmm.
lot of time training for what I'm doing. I spent a lot of money doing what I'm doing to do what I do. And nowhere did anyone teach me how to run a business,
Mm.
how to own a private practice.
Hmm.
And, that's fine, whatever. Okay. Teach me how to actually work with people. That is very important. But so many of us do go on to do private practice, and the fact that we don't talk about it, we don't get any type of business training blows my mind.
Totally.
So there's a lot, right? And I really started this practice, I've said, from a place of desperation.
Mm.
I'm usually a very thoughtful, intentional person. Like I have many to-do lists. I'm a planner to a T.
Hmm.
But at my previous workplace, I needed a way out, and I knew that I could make money fairly quickly by just seeing people one on one.
Hmm.
Um, so I did it really quickly without fully thinking about all the things that it takes to run a business. And
Hmm.
now it's been about a little over a year, and I'm like, oh, okay, branding, what is that?
Yeah.
Marketing, okay, how do I do that? And
Hmm.
I'm trying to expand beyond just providing therapy services. I'm trying to get into doing consulting around diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So,
Hmm.
like, how does one do that? I don't know.
Right.
How do I pay taxes
I was
in a
just gonna
way
say
that
the taxes
I
just
don't know?
yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm getting ready to move my business out of a state. So I'm encountering a whole bunch of like, how do I do that?
Oh,
So
do you
there's
have
just a
to
lot.
do your license again and all that?
So luckily, I am already licensed in both Delaware and Pennsylvania, which Pennsylvania is where I'm moving to. But if I
Okay.
wasn't, yes, I would have to go through a whole licensing process to do
Oh
that. So
Lord.
there's a lot outside of just the therapy space. Like now, it's like if my clients don't pay me, I'm not getting paid, which is very different than when I worked in higher ed, where I'd get paid no matter whether they showed up or not. And now I have to have conversations with people about money that I didn't have to have before.
And
And I
insurance,
have
do you
to,
do insurance and all that
I
too?
don't,
No,
then I
okay.
have to
Well
have
that
conversations about that too,
yeah, yeah, about not doing it, right?
about not doing it. So there's
Right.
a lot of like the logistical pieces now and doing my own bookkeeping and, all of that that's like, whoa, I don't know how to do
Yeah.
any of this, creating a website. And
Yeah.
so it's been interesting. I wouldn't change it, but it's certainly I am figuring it out as I go.
Yeah. In my, just travels online looking for people to interview and things I find interesting, there are a few therapists out there now who are coaching other therapists on
Mhm.
how to do this,
Yes.
which I thought was great. And actually, I'll just share this. My mom is has a podcast, and it's a business podcast, and she literally notice the exact same thing within her field. So
Yeah.
her podcast is all about actually running an interior design business.
Yeah.
She never talks about throw pillows, and paint colors. It's all
Yeah.
how do you run a business?
It's different. It
It
is.
is.
It
Yeah.
was. I mean, I think that was the big shock to me of like, oh, I know how to do therapy, but I do not know how to run a bit. I am
Yeah.
also a businesswoman.
Right. Right.
That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
They're two very different
they're
hats.
two different things. So I'm learning every day. I'm surrounding myself with other people who are, where
Mm.
I am in terms
Hmm.
of building their business beyond me to get some guidance, looking to some of those therapists that are out there who are coaching around that,
Hmm.
and hoping that I've crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. Sometimes that keeps me up like, oh, did I do that right? Is the IRS going to come looking for me?
I know. It's so stressful. It really is. It's so stressful. I know. I know. Well, they should teach it in school.
Yes,
They should.
definitely.
I mean, this
Definitely.
is the thing. If we're when we're talking all about this higher education stuff, like we graduate college with a lacking a lot of basic life skills.
Yes, a lot of basic. I'm like, there's a lot that is useful, but there's so much more that should be taught. And for my PhD alone, that was 5 years of education, and not one class was around like, if you go into private practice, here's what you need to know. And
Right.
so, yeah, I have thoughts
It's
about like, how can I change that? How
okay.
can I
No,
address
let's do
that?
that. I'm into that. Okay. When you figure it out, you tell me and
I will. I'll let you know.
I'll get whatever people I got. You get all your people. And
Yes.
well, yeah. Okay. All right. Good. I like that. Um, okay. Well, is there, and so, all right. So, oh, is there anything that you would have wanted to make sure you said today or anything that you would have asked yourself that I did not think to?
Hmm, that's a good question too.
Oh, thank you.
No, I feel like I've really said a lot. Um, yeah, and I think one thing that I will say, you didn't ask, but in terms of my path to get where I am,
Hmm.
is that like aim high, people.
Hmm. I
Aim
like
high.
that. Yeah.
There are a lot of people like now that I am a doctor, right? I'm like, wow, what does that even mean? You think so much like, oh, you have this thing or you're in this position. You must know things. You must be so much better or smarter. And it's like, there are quite a few people who I'm like, you're here too? Like, how? And
Yeah.
so I try to use that to say, like, oh, well, then I can go for things. And I
Mm.
didn't know that a long time ago. And now I'm pushing myself constantly when that sea of doubt comes up of like, oh, are you sure you can do that? And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
try. At the very least, try.
Yeah.
So I think for anyone listening who is like, maybe, I don't know if I can do such and such with these responsibilities or at this stage in my life, don't sell yourself short. Let other people tell you no. Don't start by telling you no first, right?
Hmm.
Try, just try, and, push yourself to do things that maybe you doubt that you can and see where you land.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
kind of how I'm moving right now. And so far, it's been going okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's no guarantee that it won't be hard or
Yep.
you won't, you know,
Fail.
fail, take a
Yeah.
misstep,
Yep.
but I think I think everything you said is totally on point and it's hard to push through that and like the
Yes.
imposter
Yes.
syndrome and all of that, but usually it works out.
Yeah. Yeah. And even if it doesn't, you've learned something along the way. I just submitted a proposal for a contract to do some consulting work. And I almost didn't do it because I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, but yeah, you do.
Mhm.
Just try. And in
Mhm.
that process, I got so much energy. I've gotten more clear about what I want to do, where I want to go. And now I have a document that I can pull from. I wouldn't have had
Mm.
any of that had I not tried. So I
Mhm.
think even if it doesn't get selected and it doesn't work out, I still walk away with the experience and the lessons it gave me. So
Yeah.
just try.
Yeah.
Just try.
Yeah. And so, as a therapist, you'll be licensed, I guess, now to see people in Pennsylvania,
Mhm.
correct? But
Yep.
the training and the cultural, what is
Mhm.
that? What are you trying to do there?
Yeah, so the other part of my business is around consulting. So oftentimes, a lot of organizations, especially over the last year, everyone wants to be anti-racist. Everyone wants to do diversity and inclusion work. Nobody knows how to do it. And so a lot of the work I've been doing, I mean, before I started this private practice, but certainly now, is working with different individuals or companies or organizations to say, like, okay, well, what does that mean here? What do we need to know about ourselves to be different? So some of the conversation we started off having, you and I started off having
Mm-hmm.
around reflecting on ourselves, on, learning about unconscious bias, microaggressions, institutional racism, having hard conversations. So I am going in and helping folks have those conversations, learn, and do other things that kind of further whatever the goal is for the business or the group. Um, I've done a few, and I'm in the process of really wanting to expand that so that it's more of a balance between therapy and doing consulting work versus all therapy
Okay.
and nothing else.
Okay, and that is something that if someone's listening and they have a small business or they have, kind of strings to pull at a big company, this you
Hmm.
could do anywhere from anywhere. We're not
Yep.
limited to the
Not
state.
limited.
Okay.
And
Okay.
especially now with virtual stuff, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I it's so easy to do that, to hop on a Zoom call or something. So yes, if folks are like, I want to learn more, go to my website. There's lots of information there, and they can always email or call me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank
Yeah,
you, Dr. Vanessa, for your
of
time.
course.
This was
Yeah.
wonderful. And, we'll probably chat often since we're best friends now.
Yeah, love it. Please do. I mean, you have my email. I'll give you my number. We can have
Okay.
virtual date.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Let's do
I'm
that.
down. I'm down. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. So, what do you think? Could you relate to our conversation about higher ed? This won't be the last time you hear me talk about my college experience. It comes up again and again in later conversations. And although I'm really not feeling pulled to go back to school anytime soon, I do wonder what would have happened if I was given more time and guidance on what to do and where to go with my life at the time. Now, that being said, I was given a lot, and I'm so grateful. I think the underlying issue and what causes a lot of personal and professional unhappiness later in life is that we're forced to decide what we want to do and who we want to be at such a young age. At that age, the hormones, the emotions, the rebellion, all of that clouds our judgment. And while all of those experiences that we have as 20 somethings are valuable and impactful, they may not be best suited for simultaneously requiring us to decide a lifelong path. And I really liked what Dr. V said about, we're sold this dream. Okay, go to school, work hard, get the job, life solved. It just doesn't work that way. And, this brings me to the through line of Dr. V's message, and that is that it's okay to pivot. It's okay to try something new. You're not a failure. And as I'm saying this, it feels like one of those sentiments that are just words. I don't know really how to explain my feeling on that. I hope you get it. But, I talk about this a lot when it comes up with self-care and, I don't know. There's ideas out there for me that sound like just words until they're not, until they really mean something to you. So maybe take some time to think about how to make these words matter to you. If you want to completely change your career, leave a long-term relationship, decide that being a stay-at-home mom isn't for you, or explore another religion, whatever it is, go to therapy, process it all, and know that it's okay to be uncomfortable. I'm going to sound like really preachy right now and all that stuff, but discomfort is usually a good sign that you're headed in the right direction. And I know I hate it. I hate even saying it because until I had an experience where I could really feel that in my bones, I didn't get it. And it just sounded like one of those things that people say to make you feel better. But it's not. It really it really is. If you're feeling uncomfortable about something, you're probably in the right direction. Whether that be discomfort, like, hey, this isn't working, or now I'm trying something new and I'm scared. It's reminding me of an episode I listened to this weekend of Glennon Doyle's podcast. She had Brene Brown on there, and they were talking about a lot of great things. You should go listen to it, and I'll link it. But one of the things that Glennon and Abby said was that in their house they have a word, it's called skited. And it's how her kids and her family, they determine the difference between, mommy, I'm scared, I want to do something new, or I want to try something new and I'm scared, but I know it's a good thing for me to do. And so I'm skited, I'm scared and excited, versus, mommy, I'm actually really scared of this situation. So anyway, I don't know. If you're skited, it's probably something you should do. If you're just plain scared, I don't know. Go to therapy. I'm not a therapist. That's why I interview therapists. I don't have all the answers. But now that I've just rambled, I hope you enjoyed the show. And Dr. V, thank you so much. Can't wait to connect with you again. And thank you for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.